It was a warm Saturday morning in Atlanta, Georgia. The streets bustled with families heading out for errands, kids clutching ice cream cones, and cars lining up near the busy downtown shopping district. Inside a large retail chain store, 68-year-old Evelyn Carter, a black grandmother with soft silver curls and kind brown eyes, pushed a cart slowly through the aisles. Her back ached, but her spirit was warm. She was buying groceries for her grandchildren, who were visiting her later that evening. To many, she was just another elderly woman in the store, but Evelyn carried with her a lifetime of strength, memories of marches for civil rights in her youth, stories of working 2 jobs to raise her children, and scars from decades of quiet battles against prejudice. Still, she carried herself with grace. As she reached the produce section, Evelyn noticed a white store manager, Mark Stevens, a man in his late 40s, tall, stocky, and with a sharp jawline. His eyes were cold, and his tone with employees was curt. He orders at a young cashier nearby, his voice dripping with impatience. But then his eyes landed on Evelyn. Instead of a warm smile, he gave a long, judgmental stare. Evelyn felt the weight of it instantly. She was used to those looks, the kind that made her feel unwelcome in places she had every right to be. When Evelyn accidentally dropped an apple from her cart, Mark sneered loudly enough for people nearby to hear. "People like you always making a mess." The shoppers nearby glanced over, awkward and uncomfortable, but no one said anything. Evelyn bent slowly to pick up the apple, her hands trembling slightly. She said nothing, swallowing her pride, determined to finish her shopping. Moments later, Evelyn made her way to the checkout. She carefully placed her items on the counter, smiling softly at the young cashier. But before the girl could begin scanning, Mark swooped in. He looked at Evelyn's bag of groceries and then at her, smirking. "You sure you can afford all this?" he said, his voice loud enough for the people in line to hear. The words cut deep. Evelyn froze, her lips pressed tightly together. A man behind her frowned and muttered, "That's not right." But he didn't step forward. Mark reached for her cart, pulling one of the bags out roughly. When Evelyn tried to steady it, his hand brushed hers away aggressively. And then, without hesitation, he slapped the bag against her chest, hard enough to make her stumble backward. Gasps filled the checkout line. The bag tore, groceries spilling across the floor. Evelyn's cane clattered to the tiles as she gripped the counter to steady herself. For a moment, the world went silent. An elderly black woman had just been humiliated in front of a store full of strangers. Evelyn's eyes welled with tears, but she didn't cry out. She simply bent down slowly, her frail hands trembling as she picked up cans and fruit from the floor. Shoppers looked on, whispering. Some had phones in their hands, but hesitated to record. Others shook their heads in shame. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, whispering, "Why is he being so mean to her?" The mother hushed him quickly, pulling him close. And Mark? He stood there, arms crossed, satisfied, as though he had proven some kind of point. To him, Evelyn wasn't a customer. She wasn't a grandmother. She wasn't a human being worthy of respect. She was just someone he thought he could degrade without consequence. But Mark had no idea who Evelyn really was. After paying for her groceries with quiet dignity, Evelyn slowly made her way out of the store. But outside, she sat down on a bench, her chest aching, not from the slap of the bag, but from the humiliation of being treated less than human. What Mark didn't know was that Evelyn was not just anybody. She was the mother of Angela Carter, a respected executive in the very corporation that owned the retail chain. When Evelyn's daughter Angela called her later that day to check in, Evelyn tried to brush it off, but the quiver in her voice gave her away. Angela listened silently as her mother finally admitted what had happened. And in that moment, Angela's heart burned with both sorrow and fury. She wasn't just Evelyn's daughter. She was also one of the top executives in charge of overseeing regional operations. The very store where Mark had humiliated her mother was under her management chain. And Angela Carter was not the type of woman to let racism hide in the shadows. The next morning, Angela dressed sharply in her tailored navy suit. Her skin was a rich brown tone, her eyes sharp with determination. She was known for her intelligence, her integrity, and her unwillingness to back down when justice was at stake. She drove straight to the store, her heels clicking firmly as she walked through the sliding doors. Employees turned their heads immediately, some whispering, others stiffening nervously. They knew exactly who she was. But Mark had no idea. He saw her enter, and with his usual arrogance, smirked. "Can I help you, miss? Corporate visitors usually check in before barging in." Angela didn't flinch. She locked eyes with him, her face unreadable. What Mark didn't know was that his world was about to collapse, and the very woman he had disrespected was the one whose power would bring him down. Angela Carter walked slowly through the aisles of the store her mother had been humiliated in. She watched carefully. The store was busy, but the atmosphere felt tense. Employees avoided eye contact, moving quickly past Mark's presence. Angela could sense it. This was not just about her mother. This was a store poisoned by fear and arrogance. She stopped near the customer service desk, pretending to examine a display. That's when she overheard Mark snapping at a young black cashier. "You people need to work twice as hard to keep up," he said coldly, "or you won't last here." Angela's jaw tightened. Her mother's story wasn't an isolated incident. This was a pattern. Angela stepped aside and approached a group of employees on break. At first, they hesitated to speak. But when Angela quietly introduced herself as a regional executive, their shoulders dropped in relief. One young woman whispered, "Ma'am, he treats all the black employees like we're less than human. He cuts our hours, talks down to us, and humiliates us in front of customers. We didn't know who to complain to without losing our jobs." Another added, "Last week, he accused one of the janitors of stealing supplies, just because he was black. No proof. He just assumed." Angela listened, her expression calm, but her chest burning. Each story was like a knife twisting deeper. And then, as though fate wanted to seal Mark's downfall, a customer approached Angela quietly. She was an older white woman, hesitant but sincere. "I saw what he did to that sweet lady yesterday," she said softly. "He shoved the groceries at her like she was trash. I almost said something, but I froze. I've been thinking about it all night. I should have stood up for her." Angela's eyes softened. "You just did," she replied. Later that afternoon, Angela requested a meeting with Mark in his office. He leaned back in his chair, smug and unaware of the storm about to hit him. "So," he said, "corporate finally sending someone down here? I hope you're here to commend me. This store is one of the top performers in the district." Angela tilted her head. "Top performer, you say?" "Absolutely," Mark said proudly. "I run a tight ship. Maybe some people don't like my style, but results are results. And between you and me," he leaned forward with a sneer, "certain types of employees need stricter handling, if you know what I mean." The The silence that followed was heavy. Mark smirked, thinking he had an ally, but Angela's face remained unreadable. Angela requested a surprise all-staff meeting. Managers, supervisors, and floor workers gathered in the break room, murmuring nervously. Mark strutted in like he owned the place, clapping his hands. "All right, everyone, let's impress corporate, shall we?" Angela stood at the front, her sharp suit contrasting the dull beige walls. She looked around the room, then finally spoke. "My name is Angela Carter. I am the regional executive for this district." The room went silent. "And yesterday," she continued, her voice steady but filled with quiet fire, "my mother was humiliated in this store. Not just humiliated, targeted, degraded, and disrespected by the very person trusted to run it." Gasps filled the room. Employees exchanged wide-eyed glances. Mark's face drained of color. Angela's gaze locked on him. "Yes, Mark, I'm talking about you." Mark stammered. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding." Angela raised her hand. "Enough. I've spoken to your employees. I've spoken to customers. I've seen your behavior with my own eyes. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern." She turned to the staff. "You've been working under a climate of fear. Some of you stayed silent because you didn't think anyone would listen. I am here to tell you, your voices matter. And today, everything changes." The employees erupted into applause, some wiping tears, others finally standing tall. Mark tried to interrupt, his voice trembling. "You can't do this." Angela's eyes narrowed. "Watch me." The break room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the vending machine. Every pair of eyes was on Angela and Mark. Angela's voice cut through the silence. "Mark Stevens, you are officially relieved of your duties. Effective immediately. You are terminated from this company." The words hit like thunder. Gasps rippled through the staff. Mark's jaw dropped, his arrogance crumbling in real time. You can't just fire me like that," he sputtered, his voice shaky. "I've been running this store for 10 years. Angela's expression remained cool, unshaken. "And in those 10 years, you've built an environment of discrimination and fear. You've disrespected employees. You've humiliated customers, and yesterday, you targeted my mother. There is no place in this company for racism. None." The room erupted into applause, this time louder, bolder, filled with relief. Angela wasn't finished. She turned to the other managers, standing awkwardly at the back of the room. "I've reviewed your leadership as well, and I've discovered that some of you stood by, watching this behavior unfold for years. You allowed this culture of disrespect to thrive under your watch." Their faces paled. They shifted nervously. Angela's tone sharpened. "You are supposed to lead with integrity. Instead, you chose silence. Today, that silence ends. Effective immediately. The entire management team is dismissed." Shockwaves swept through the room. Some employees gasped. Others broke into smiles, whispering, "Finally," under their breath. The toxic leadership structure that had poisoned the store for years crumbled in a single moment. Angela looked out at the stunned crowd of floor workers, cashiers, and janitors. "You are the backbone of this store," she said firmly. "From today forward, things will change. You will be treated with dignity, no matter your skin color, no matter your position. If anyone dares to mistreat you, my office will hear about it immediately." Tears welled up in the eyes of some employees. For the first time in years, they felt seen, valued, protected. One young black cashier whispered to her coworker, I feel like I can finally breathe. Later that evening, Angela returned to her mother's home. Evelyn sat in her armchair, her grandchildren playing at her feet. She looked up as Angela entered, worry in her eyes. "Well?" she asked softly. Angela knelt beside her, taking her hand. "Mom, it's over. He's gone. All of them are gone." Evelyn's eyes widened, her lips trembling. You did that?" Angela smiled gently. "You raised me to never let injustice win. Today, I made sure of that." For the first time since that painful day, Evelyn's shoulders relaxed. A tear rolled down her cheek, but this time, it wasn't from humiliation. It was from pride. News spread quickly. Shoppers who had witnessed the incident came forward, praising Angela's swift action. Videos of her firing marks circulated online, sparking a national conversation about racism in customer service and corporate accountability. Other employees across the company felt empowered, knowing they had the right to speak up without fear. And in that one store, something remarkable happened. It became a place of kindness, fairness, and respect. Racism had tried to humiliate a grandmother, but it ended up exposing a system that needed change. The lesson was clear. Silence protects the oppressor, but courage destroys them. Evelyn Carter was no longer just a victim. She was the spark that brought justice not only for herself, but for dozens of employees who had been suffering in silence. And as Angela hugged her mother tightly that night, she whispered, "No one will ever silence us again."